the DEP says. That hasn't always led us well in this region. And so my question is that Mr. Dijsselroth, sorry if I mispronounced your name, you said the site has been monitored since 1993. Is that true?
I said that they've been doing groundwater testing on the site and submitting those results to the DEP. So
So you did some digging today. The EPA actually claims on their site, which might not be updated, that they were there. The EPA was there last in 2003. Do you know anything about that?
The EPA does inspections for a bunch of different stuff, and typically they typically would not get involved. This is not a site I would expect EPA to get involved with.
Okay, thank you. So my question is that we're throwing around the word clearance a lot. At first, I thought that you were saying that it had already been cleared, but I think now that's not true. Correct. It has not been given any type of clearance?
Correct.
Okay. So in the event that it has been monitored for so long for groundwater and what so forth with whatever testing you all have gotten done, my question is whether or not the standards by the DEP have changed during that time period that could have contributed to the board's idea that it might eventually be cleared. What has changed at the property since they started digging there?
Actually, DEP standards, they were initially established in 1995, and they've actually raised a number of them. They allow higher concentrations of some constituents. They've lowered some, they've lowered the allowable.
So they're inconsistent with what they decide is safe?
It changes over time as more scientific data comes in. What's changed is DEP's program at this point is 30 years old. It's a pretty well understood process, and it's actually, if you can believe it, DEP's process was actually utilized as a model for a number of other states for their brownfield remediation programs.
I'm sure it was. We have a lot of groundwater problems here, so that makes sense. Okay, that was my only question.
Thank you. Next. Hi, Jesse White, 3249 Village Run Road. My question is about the DEP on the enforcement end. So there's been a lot of discussion about the agreement.
I'm sorry to hear. Please be quiet.
There's been a lot of discussion about the agreement, the sales agreement, but there was also a second component to that, which was the DEP consent order that the township entered into. And I know I don't want to get into the weeds of the terms of all that. My question is pretty simple. The way I read it is that if the township can be forced to go forward with enforcement by the DEP, correct? As a result of the consent decree, it's ordered by the DEP that the township will handle the remediation. That would not have been the case had that consent decree not been signed, correct?
It's a legal question. I'm not going to answer it. I would talk to qualified legal counsel for that.
I guess it would have to be a rhetorical question for the 6th, which is knowing what's there or what's not there, or not knowing what's there. Why in the world would the township agree to be subject to a DEP consent decree in order to have to remediate this property, potentially at taxpayer expense, when they didn't have to? Why would we open ourselves up to that kind of liability? I mean, that was openly agreed to.
Is that a question for me?
That's a question for everybody to answer.
Gabby, that is a legal counsel question. Environmental reason. No, an environmental.
I'm the solicitor for the town here for tonight's meeting, but we had nothing. They had separate environmental counsel for that, so I can't include.
It seems like a fairly simple question.
It's a consent decree question.
Do you want me to answer it? It's a legal question. I'm not qualified.
I haven't seen the consent decree. I have no idea what it says. We weren't able to look at anything, any of these documents.
You should be able to answer the question.
I have on my website.
Do you have another question, Jesse?
I guess I'm not going to get into that one.
I don't know, the board.
I think it's a policy question, really not a legal question.
I don't think it's a question for Frank, Ron, or I. None of the three of us ever voted to sign that consent decree. I think the question is for you and Mr. Casiola, which is why did you sign it? Why did you agree or vote to sign the consent decree?
I can answer that.
Yes, sir.
The consent decree brought the DEP into the arrangement. We could have had a separate agreement, a sales agreement between us and ABB, but then it would be subject to ABB's longevity and things like that for the promises. This agreement wasn't a sales agreement between Cecil Thompson and ABB. It was a DEP agreement form that we had to use that brought the DEP into it. So it's a three-party agreement that the DEP signs off on it, we sign off on it, and the ABB signs off on it. And that gives us the exoneration for in perpetuity if anything ever goes wrong in that property. You know, with a lot of these abandoned gas stations, the people are afraid of buying because the DEP could go after a current owner if they're working on that property and they discover something. And on a private agreement, the current property owners could be liable for that. This agreement, the DEP signs off with us. If ABB cleans into Act 2 clearance standards, they're a party to this. With that consent decree, we'll never have any liability on it. So 10 years from now, somebody's digging there, say we sell a lot to some industrial user, and they find something, they'll go after the ABB. They won't have, they'll never.
Wait a minute, whoa.
So that's
Whoa.
the answer.
That is absolutely not true. The sales agreement says in no uncertain terms that 12 years, it's either 12 years after the date of the Act 2 clearance, or so many years after the township enters into a lease agreement, which can be done before the Act 2 clearance is received, which will nullify some of the walkaway provisions. But after 12 years, the township assumes any and all liability forever.
Absolutely false. The agreement says for 12 years, if anything comes up, ABB has to correct it. They have to. But the DEP doesn't have to be involved. After 12 years, it's up to the DEP whether they go after ABB or not.
Oh, that's wrong.
For 12, that's what they signed.
Let's get that answer back.
Yeah, we finish it. For 12 years, automatically, if somebody's working up there and something gets discovered, ABB's on the hook. After 12 years, they're not, unless the DEP decides they are, and that's the answer.
I won't give my opinion, but I will read this. It says, on closing date, buyer will assume, buyer is us, the township. Buyer will assume responsibility for any ongoing groundwater monitoring and reporting to the DEP. Buyer will be responsible for execution of a post-remediation care plan as required by the Act 2 release. Seller will retain responsibility and shall indemnify and defend buyer from any claims for environmental liabilities not covered by Act 2 release for a period of 12 years after the date. If the DEP issues Act 2 release on different dates for media soil or different portions of the land, seller's indemnity period for such media or portion shall commence on the date of the corresponding Act 2 release. I can keep reading this. The indemnity shall cover any and all third-party claims or government enforcement actions under the land recycling environmental liens, a whole bunch of things.
Again, I mean, I think we already started.
Hold on, let me read the
Because
last
it's
one.
an appropriate
Following-
forum to talk about these.
I'm just reading it.
I know.
Following the expiration of 12 years after the date of the Act 2 release, buyer shall indemnify seller from and against all such liabilities. Not my opinion.
Exactly. That means we can't go after them either. It's up to the DEP. They can go after them or not. Just like
That means anybody can go after the township.
No, we're exonerated from anything. As I said,
That's not what it says.
Yes, it does. That's exactly what it says. After 12 years, ABB's off the hook from us for the 12 years. They're not off the hook from the DEP.
But the language clearly says that the township shall indemnify ABB, which means you take liability away from them. That's exactly what indemnify means.
Well, yeah, then we won't go after them if something comes up. The DEP could decide to go after them. That's the
Where does it
agreement.
say? Where does it
That's the
say?
agreement. That's the exemption that we got. That's why they signed on the consent order. But again, if our environmental attorneys hadn't been fired by days, they'd have been here tonight.
Maybe they should have been fired before this thing was signed.
Thank you.
But wait, I'll ask one last question because I know that we have to limit it. I guess my question is in terms of a way out of this, and I know there's no legal counsel up here, but something to think about. Maybe the fact that the people that voted to sign it didn't know what the hell they were signing maybe that could be a way to get out of this thing, because it makes no sense at all.
Exactly.
That's your
My name is Julie Serrani, I'm the
your
one who
opinion, it's
Chestnut
not
Court.
I'm sorry, what's
everybody's
the
opinion.
Julie Serrani, she's 102 Chestnut Court.
Yeah.
If you can go back up a couple slides before this is, I just have a question. A few previous slides ago, it said,
No, I read it too.
so it says the go, no-go testing, nope, that one, yeah. So go, no-go testing, and I'm asking this question because the public notice said this was to discuss the township contract to buy the property. So if the go, no-go testing was completed and there's constituents tested, why wasn't that just a simple walk away, no go? Why are we still having this conversation?
Is that a question for you or for the board?
It is a simple question. If the testing was a go, no-go testing, and there were constituents found, which would indicate no-go, why are we still having this conversation?
Is that a question that you guys want me to answer that?
Yes, yes.
Yes, no?
I mean, I think it's a simple. I don't, this is a, yes, could you answer that? Is it
Because the data is, the go, no-go is, that's an industry standard term that we use quite a bit. And because the process of looking at a site is very iterative. I mean, there are times we'll have to go back, big cumbersome sites, we might be back 6 times, 5 times to put in additional wells, to collect additional groundwater samples, to collect samples to try to define what the contamination that we have to deal with actually is. The go, no-go is there highly impacted material that we have, methyl ethyl death, getting off the property, getting into that stream, concentration that's so high, we know immediately there's no way to properly treat that water. So that's what a go, no-go decision is. What we have seen so far, the only significant issue, and this is the one that gives everybody a lot of pause, is what's going on in those little tributaries. Because again, there's a lot of work that still has to be done in those. We also have to do additional work. You know, again, when I say additional, we have to. There's a decision that needs to be made whether that site would be continue to be investigated by us. But we looked at groundwater and surface water to be the biggest problem. Because it can be very expensive if you've got a significant groundwater problem. If you've got a surface water problem, it can be just as expensive, if not more so. So the data that we looked at, you know, we have the stream that's the problem child. Groundwater isn't really the problem. I think to kind of summarize, and I'll say that some of the prior members were okay with the potential risk associated with looking at that stream and not knowing all the issues associated with that boating pile, because we still have to characterize that. You know, some of it you've got a different constituency now up here. Some are not as comfortable with that risk.
And I have to address something too. The DEP gave us a choice. There's for Act 2 clearance that we could address on the surface, on the land, which we wanted to use. But there's also a separate component of the water quality that goes off that site. So they give us a choice. If you want to have Act 2 clearance on the whole property and exoneration from water runoff and everything, you've got to test it. You've got to go through the Act 2 and work with the groundwater also. But we didn't have to test the groundwater. We told our engineering consultant we want that tested first, because if that comes out bad and it can't be fixed or bad constituents there, we're going to drop it right off the bat. We're not going to
You didn't drop it.
No, I'm saying, I said, if it comes out bad, we're not even going to look at the surface water, the surface itself. Well, when the test came back, it wasn't that bad. It said it could be fixed. So then we stopped. Then we got to the point where we stopped because of the grant that we were applying for. We had told our professionals to stop all the testing, which they can confirm, and Dan can confirm, and the attorneys were told to stop. So since September of last year, they haven't done a thing for us because we told them to hold off. We're in the process of getting a grant. We were told right off the bat that it looked good and that it's worth waiting for. So we're waiting for it, and we'll be hearing about it shortly about the approval.
Thank you.
Excuse me,
I see people are leaving